If they think your silence means you lost, they have no idea what's about to happen. What feels quiet to them is actually the beginning of their realization. You didn't walk away because you had nothing to say, you walked away because you finally understood everything. Stay till the end, because by the time this message is over, you'll see why your silence is the loudest lesson they'll ever learn. There comes a moment in life when you realize that explaining yourself over and over again is not strength, it is exhaustion, and constantly defending your heart is not maturity, it is survival mode, and the day you finally choose silence is the day everything begins to shift in ways you never imagined, because silence is not weakness, silence is not surrender, silence is not losing the argument. Silence is the calm withdrawal of your energy from a place that never valued it in the first place. And when you stop reacting, stop chasing, stop proving, stop clarifying, stop begging to be understood, something powerful happens in the unseen realm of human psychology, because people who were comfortable with your noise suddenly become uncomfortable with your quiet. People who thrived on your reactions suddenly feel starved of control, and people who assumed you would always come back to explain yourself begin to realize that you have moved into a different frequency entirely, and this is where the real lesson begins, not for you but for them, because your silence becomes a mirror that reflects everything they tried to ignore when you were speaking, when you were arguing, when you were trying, when you were giving chances, when you were overextending grace, and now without your voice filling the space, they are left alone with their own thoughts, their own actions, their own guilt, their own insecurity. And that silence becomes louder than any words you could have spoken. Most people mistake silence for defeat because they live in a world addicted to noise, where whoever speaks last thinks they have won and whoever shouts louder believes they are right. But real power does not raise its voice, real power withdraws its presence, and when you stop engaging in unnecessary drama, when you stop responding to disrespect, when you stop entertaining half-hearted effort, you are not losing, you are teaching. You are teaching people that access to you is a privilege, not a right. You are teaching them that your attention is earned, not demanded. You are teaching them that your peace is more valuable than their ego, and that lesson hits harder than any confrontation ever could, because confrontation gives them something to fight against, but silence gives them nothing to grab onto, nothing to twist, nothing to manipulate, and that absence of access unsettles them more than any emotional reaction ever did. There was a time when you would over-explain yourself because you wanted to be understood. You thought if you just said it the right way, if you just found the right words, if you just proved your loyalty enough, if you just showed your intentions clearly, then everything would change. But growth teaches you that people understand exactly what they want to understand and ignore exactly what they are not ready to accept. And repeating yourself to someone who has already decided not to hear you is like pouring water into a closed bottle. It will never fill, it will only spill. So instead of exhausting yourself trying to force understanding, you step back, you go quiet, you protect your energy. And that quiet is not bitterness, it is clarity, it is the realization that not every battle deserves your voice and not every misunderstanding deserves your explanation. Your silence becomes their lesson because it forces accountability without you saying a single word. It removes the distraction of arguments and leaves only consequences. And consequences are the greatest teachers in life because they cannot be debated. They cannot be negotiated, they cannot be gaslit, they simply exist. And when you stop showing up the way you used to, when you stop being available the way you once were, when you stop tolerating what you once excused, people feel the shift. Immediately, they feel the absence of your energy, the absence of your reassurance, the absence of your effort, and that absence speaks volumes. It tells them that the dynamic has changed, it tells them that you have changed, it tells them that access to you is no longer guaranteed, and that realization forces them to confront something they never had to face before, which is the possibility of losing you. Silence is powerful because it removes emotional fuel from toxic cycles, and toxic cycles survive on reaction. They survive on you defending yourself, on you arguing back, on you trying to prove your worth, on you chasing resolution with someone who benefits from chaos. But when you go silent, when you detach emotionally, when you refuse to play the role they assigned you, the entire structure begins to collapse because there is no longer resistance to push against. There is no longer a predictable response to manipulate, and that unpredictability makes them uncomfortable. It makes them question, it makes them replay conversations in their mind trying to figure out when the shift happened, when you stopped caring, when you stopped reacting, when you stopped fighting to be heard. And the truth is, you did not stop caring, you simply started caring about yourself more. There is a deep strength in choosing silence over retaliation, because retaliation keeps you tied to the very energy you are trying to escape, but silence cuts the cord cleanly and completely. It says, I refuse to participate in something that drains me. I refuse to keep proving my value to someone who benefits from undervaluing me. I refuse to keep explaining boundaries to someone who only hears convenience. And that refusal is not cruelty, it is self-respect, and self-respect is often misunderstood by those who were comfortable with your self-sacrifice, because when you were overgiving they felt secure, when you were over-explaining they felt powerful, when you were overextending they felt important, but when you step back and go quiet, you shift the balance, and suddenly they have to face the reality that you are no longer orbiting around them. Your silence becomes their lesson because it teaches them that you were not as dependent as they assumed, it teaches them that your patience had limits, it teaches them that your love was a choice, not a weakness, and when that choice is withdrawn, it creates a void that forces reflection. And reflection is uncomfortable for those who avoided responsibility, because now without your voice filling the silence, they must sit with their own thoughts. And often what people discover in that silence is not flattering. They realize they took you for granted, they realize they pushed too far, they realize they assumed you would always return. And that realization can either inspire growth or expose their pride, but either way the lesson has been delivered without you having to raise your voice. Silence also protects your dignity, because not every situation deserves a dramatic exit. Sometimes the most powerful exit is the quiet one, the one where you simply stop participating, the one where you remove yourself without announcements, without ultimatums, without final speeches, and that quiet departure leaves a stronger impact than any emotional farewell ever could, because it communicates finality. It communicates certainty, it communicates that you have already made peace with your decision internally and you no longer need external validation to confirm it. And when people sense that certainty, they feel it deeply, because certainty is unshakable and unshakable energy cannot be manipulated. When your silence becomes their lesson, it also becomes your freedom, because every argument you avoid is energy saved, every unnecessary explanation you withhold is clarity gained, every emotional reaction you resist is power reclaimed, and over time that reclaimed power transforms you. You become calmer, more observant, less reactive, more intentional. And the same situations that once triggered you now barely move you because you have learned that your peace is more important than being right. And being right is temporary, but peace is permanent, and once you taste that inner peace, you will never again trade it for temporary validation. People often return when they feel your silence, not because they suddenly understand you but because they feel the shift in access, they sense the distance, they notice the absence, and human nature is wired to crave what feels scarce, and when your energy is no longer freely available, it becomes valuable, but the true test is not whether they return. The true test is whether you have grown enough to recognize why you went silent in the first place, whether you remember the exhaustion, the disrespect, the imbalance that led you to choose yourself, because silence is not meant to be a strategy to make someone chase you, it is meant to be a boundary that protects your soul. Your silence becomes their lesson when it is rooted in self-worth rather than pride, when it comes from a place of clarity rather than revenge, when it is guided by growth rather than ego, because silence used as manipulation is still noise, but silence rooted in peace is powerful, and that power changes the dynamic permanently. It shifts the control back into your hands. It teaches others how to treat you without you having to lecture them, and it reveals who truly values your presence and who only valued your attention. In the end, not everyone will understand your silence. Some will label it arrogance, some will call it coldness, some will accuse you of changing, but growth always looks like change to those who benefited from your old version, and you are not responsible for staying the same just to make others comfortable. You are responsible for evolving into someone who protects their peace, honors their boundaries, and chooses dignity over drama, and if that evolution requires silence, then let your silence speak, let it teach, let it expose, let it protect, because the loudest message you will ever send is the one that requires no words at all, and when you master the art of silent strength, you will realize that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is absolutely nothing. What makes your silence even more powerful now is that it is no longer emotional, it is intentional. And there is a huge difference between the two, because emotional silence is when you withdraw hoping someone notices, hoping someone feels your absence and rushes to fix what they broke. But intentional silence is different. Intentional silence is when you withdraw because you have already seen enough, understood enough, tolerated enough, and you no longer need closure from someone who only offered confusion. And that shift from emotional reaction to intentional detachment is what transforms your silence from a temporary pause into a permanent boundary, and boundaries are not loud declarations, they are consistent behaviors. They are the quiet decision to no longer participate in what disrespects you, and once people realize that your silence is not a phase but a decision, that is when the real lesson begins to sink in deeply. At first they may test it, they may send small messages, subtle reactions, indirect comments, or sudden curiosity just to see if you will respond the way you used to, because people are accustomed to patterns, and when you break a pattern it unsettles them, especially if that pattern benefited them, and when you do not respond with the same urgency, when you do not explain yourself, when you do not rush to defend your position, they start to feel something unfamiliar, which is uncertainty, and uncertainty is uncomfortable for someone who once felt secure in your predictability, because before they knew exactly how to trigger you, exactly how to pull you back in, exactly how to make you prove yourself, but now they are facing a version of you that cannot be pulled so easily, and that unpredictability becomes their lesson in a way words never could. Your silence forces them to confront the reality that you were never obligated to stay, you were choosing to stay, you were choosing to fight for clarity, you were choosing to extend patience, and when that choice is removed, they begin to understand that what they assumed was guaranteed was actually grace, and grace has limits, and people rarely appreciate grace until it is gone. Because when something is constantly available it feels ordinary, but when it disappears it feels valuable, and your absence recalibrates their perception of your worth, not because you changed your value but because you stopped discounting it for their comfort. There is also something transformative happening within you during this silence because while they are learning the lesson externally, you are learning one internally. You are learning that you can survive without constant validation, that you can stand firm without explaining every detail of your heart, that you can walk away without announcing it to the world, and that inner stability becomes addictive in the healthiest way, because you begin to realize how much energy you were pouring into conversations that led nowhere, into people who misunderstood you on purpose, into dynamics that drained more than they gave, and now that your energy is no longer scattered, you feel more grounded, more centered, more in control of your emotions, and that control is not coldness, it is maturity. Silence teaches you patience because you are no longer rushing to fix what is not yours to fix, you are no longer jumping in to repair every misunderstanding, you are allowing time and consequences to do what arguments never could, and time is one of the most powerful teachers in existence, because over time patterns become undeniable, over time absence becomes noticeable, over time memories become louder. And when someone sits long enough in the space you once filled, they either grow or they harden, but either way your lesson has been delivered without confrontation, and that is the beauty of silent strength. It does not chase outcomes, it allows outcomes to reveal themselves naturally. As days pass, they may begin replaying moments in their mind. They may remember how you tried to communicate calmly, how you expressed your needs clearly, how you offered chances repeatedly, and now in your absence those memories feel different, because hindsight removes ego and replaces it with perspective, and perspective often arrives too late for those who ignored truth in real time, but that is not your responsibility anymore. Because your role was never to force someone to see your value. Your role was to honor it yourself, and by choosing silence you are finally doing exactly that. Your silence also exposes intentions, because genuine people will approach with humility, they will reflect, they will acknowledge, they will seek understanding without defensiveness. But those who are only attached to control will respond with pride, blame, or indifference, and that reaction reveals more than any argument ever could, because silence removes the smoke and leaves only clarity. And clarity is powerful because it prevents you from romanticizing what was actually draining you, it prevents you from returning to situations that required you to shrink yourself just to maintain them. There will be moments when you feel tempted to break your silence, moments when nostalgia whispers, moments when loneliness tries to convince you that speaking again will bring relief, but growth requires discipline, and discipline in this context means remembering why you chose peace over noise in the first place, remembering the emotional exhaustion, the repeated cycles, the conversations that went in circles. And reminding yourself that temporary comfort is not worth long-term disrespect. Because every time you break a boundary for emotional relief, you teach others that your limits are flexible, but every time you honor your silence, you teach them that your standards are firm. The most powerful part of this journey is realizing that your silence is not about punishment, It is about alignment. It is about aligning yourself with environments that reciprocate effort, with people who communicate clearly, with dynamics that feel safe rather than chaotic, and once you experience relationships that do not require you to constantly defend your intentions, you will wonder why you ever tolerated less, because peace feels unfamiliar at first when you are used to intensity, but unfamiliar does not mean wrong, it often means healthier, and your silence is creating space for that healthier reality to enter your life. Eventually the lesson becomes undeniable because silence creates distance, and distance creates perspective, and perspective creates understanding, and whether they admit it or not, they will feel the difference. They will notice that you no longer orbit around their moods, that you no longer react to their inconsistencies, that you no longer chase their attention, and that shift forces them to either step up or step away. But either outcome benefits you, because stepping up requires growth and stepping away removes imbalance, and both outcomes align you closer to peace. So as you continue walking this quiet path, understand that you are not being passive, you are being powerful, you are not losing your voice, you are choosing when and where it deserves to be heard, and that discernment is wisdom, because not every ear deserves your explanation and not every heart deserves your vulnerability, and when your silence is rooted in self-respect, it becomes unshakable. It becomes a statement without words, it becomes a boundary without anger, it becomes a lesson without confrontation, and in the end the greatest realization of all is that the moment you stopped trying to be understood by everyone was the moment you finally understood yourself, and that self-understanding is worth more than any argument you ever could have won.